Hey, everybody. Me.
Hi.
This is Misty. Okay, but y'all might need to switch places. You don't really have to, but Misty and Samantha are the names, but Misty's on the right, Samantha's on the left. So you just have to remember that. I am doing my thing where I'm adjusting my settings, and I always sort of feel bad for the people who are waiting for me, like Misty and Samantha. Like, this is so awkward. All right, public. All right, got it. Okay, coming back. All right, so here we are. I'm Lauren Garrity. I'm one of the associate pastors at Messiah. This is Misty Turner on the right, Samantha Lawson on the left, and they are awesome. And I am so glad that they have agreed to share their story. Partly this came around because they've started a nonprofit where they're working on it. And I was like, well, you should share your stories because, their stories have fueled their desire to do this new thing that they're working on. So, hey, Beth. Beth is here with us. I love it when people tell us they're here, by the way. It makes us feel like we're not talking to ourselves, but that would be fine. I talk to myself all the time. I'm going to give Misty and Samantha a chance to introduce themselves, but I first wanted to just remind everybody what we're doing. We're basically doing these wilderness stories. We do it every week. I sort of chat with a new person or people, and the goal is to just hear other people's stories because even when they're not identical to ours, they often resonate with us. They strengthen us. They can strengthen our faith. We might think of it 5 years later, when we're going through something. So I'm getting a lot of really weird YouTube comments. So ignore that if you could see it. I think that's like, whatever. I mean, we must be really popular because we're getting some anyway. Yeah. So Misty and Samantha, do you want to tell us about yourselves or how would people describe you? What do you think we should know about you? What's important for us to know as we hear your stories?
So we are both survivors of domestic violence. And even though that doesn't define us, that does define our story and a lot of what we tried to do for people. But I would definitely say if I were to describe Misty, she's always the type of person that everybody's like, she's doing something. She's gonna change the way of things. When Misty talks, people are gonna listen. And so now we've gotten that opportunity to talk, and I hope people listen.
You already have your following, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're not after all weird YouTube comments. They're your group, your groupie that's here. So you have Destiny, and then I think I showed you this one.
Hey!
So you all are not weird. I take it back. But anyway, so I'm glad that everybody's watching. All right, now Samantha, your turn.
Oh, that's
me.
Sorry, Misty, your turn. I'm so distracted by these comments.
We should switch.
You want to switch?
Let's switch real quick.
I know who you are, but
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. So we have been friends for about 12 years. And if people were going to describe Sammy or ask me to describe Sammy, definitely the purest definition of friend can be, just the loyalty. And, I've learned so much from her over 12 years, not just with the situations we were in, but just her character really shines through when you get to know her. And when she's put to the test, she always rises to the occasion. That's how I describe you.
I love that. The idea to describe each other is brilliant. You ladies are awesome. And so I'm going to ask you the same questions that I ask everybody, and you can pick one or both, and you can figure out who wants to go first. What Bible character do you feel like you really love, or you have something in common with, or just sort of leaps off the page at you? Or what is a guiding scripture passage, something you really love now, or that's guided you throughout your life, or whatever?
You go first.
For me, I relate to Paul 100%. Like, so the best thing that I relate to for him is I didn't grow up in the traditional sense where we went to church all the time, this and that. There was faith, there was love and guidance there. But it wasn't until I had gone through my wilderness journey that my eyes were open. I was literally blind, how I feel Saul was blind. And I used to, and I tell people this, I used to see honk if you love Jesus stickers and make fun of them, and they're like, oh, now I'm just like honking and blaring that music and full on testifying with the rest of you, because now that my eyes are open, I feel that there's just a fire within me, and I just want that to constantly radiate. Paul ended up going on and writing so many books that encompass the New Testament because he had such a deep fire burned from being a non-believer and then having such strong feelings of God. That's where I just feel like I can relate to that, because the fierceness in me, I feel it.
Yeah, that is my answer too when I'm asked that question. But it started off being because I feel like I'm an intense person, and I always felt like that was not okay, growing up. Then I was like, wait, look, there's Paul, there's John the Baptist, there's all these people in the Bible. They're intense. It's okay. So that's why I like him. But anyway, Misty.
I would say Job, and I think, we definitely grew up like a 180. I think I grew up where we were in church Sunday morning, Wednesday. I went to a Christian school, so we had Bible class 5 days a week and chapel. And, I always had my faith, but somewhere along the line, it just kind of dwindled down and it died down. And it kind of took a back seat to life and how things were going. And I think it was when my youngest was in the hospital, and he was born at 26 weeks. He was about 6 months old and his lungs seized up. There is nothing I can do. I am not a doctor. I have no answers. I have nowhere to go. And I literally remember standing in the hallway saying, all right, God, whatever comes of this has to come. I have to turn it all over to you. And, at that point I had, I'd lost my job. I'd lost my house. I went through a wilderness. It felt like a desert, for a very long time. So I think that that was a pivotal moment in my faith of, when God really started to say, okay, thank you for turning it over to me. Now watch what I can do. Because at that point, I really had nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you say desert, what is desert for you?
I'm sorry?
When you say desert, like, what is that for you?
Everything that I'd worked for, I'd lost. Custody of my older son, my job, my house, my car, my phone. Everything. I felt like I was stripped of. And then here, my youngest is in the hospital fighting for his life.
Yeah. Aww. All right. So before we go, I'm going to totally dive in, but I keep finding myself wanting to move my computer. Can you all adjust so that yes. That's right. Okay, because I'm like, I was Samantha in it. And I kept like trying to move my stuff. So I sometimes start these stories by just asking the people, like, what? Oh, yes. And your friend said it's the emptiness and you overpowered it. Yeah, I think that's so true. Like, desert, it is self-explanatory, but there could be some like little things for each person. I want to ask, like, when did God become more than just a word? And I ask that question because it gives a really easy way to like transition into some of those harder times, because a lot of the times we experience God the most are in our really hard times. But I know sometimes people, and this goes for you both, have a story. Like, so I think what I'm going to do today is what I've been doing recently. Just like, I'm going to hand it over to you. Y'all can share it the way that you want to share it. And I'll just like interject here and there, and we'll see where we go. So we'll just like look for the ways that you found God in the midst of this really difficult time, and how, you know, God made a way when there seemed to be no way at all.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and explain. To me, a lot of it begins with the leaving process. When I left my abuser, and I had gotten information from a family friend pastor for a local shelter. And when you hear that word shelter, women's shelter, what came to my mind instantly was something cold, very uniform, not welcoming, just an all around terrifying, because you are in a situation where it's not a good situation, but they're asking you to take blind faith and allow yourself to be removed from that familiar whatever relationship, and put that blind faith in God to move you to a shelter. That was terrifying to me. I must have left at least 3 times. And each time it's a struggle. But this time I had gotten a call from the shelter saying, we can place you in 2 weeks. Do you have a safe place to stay until then? It was a Thursday. I was at work. I wasn't expecting this phone call. So I spoke to my parents. They said, you can stay with us for 2 weeks. And so I had a plan. I was terrified. I'm telling you, the leaving process made me question my strength, because for so long I had found comfort in the fear that was being fed to me.
Like, you almost became, that seemed more normal and comfortable to you because that's what you knew.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I wasn't leaning on God really at the time or anything like this. The shelter I was going into was a Christian-based organization. So I was going to be receiving counseling through them. But at this point, it was blind faith. And I was on my way home. At the end of the day, I knew I was going to leave. I had everything planned with them, with my parents. And I was just so terrified. We were arguing. And to him, it was just a regular argument that we have, that I was going to leave, but I'll be back. I was walking around grabbing everything within arm's reach and just stuffing it into a bag. The day before, I went to the grocery store and I bought a gallon of milk for my daughter. And I had to fight for this gallon of milk because my money was controlled. My actions were controlled. Everything. I had to be accountable for every single thing, up to a gallon of milk. And I bought this gallon of milk. So as I was leaving out the door, I grabbed my gallon of milk. And I got into the car and we left. And that gallon of milk is just, that was such an empowering, pivotal moment to where God was in my life and I didn't even realize it because he put that strength in me I wouldn't have found on my own. So that was, I say, the first time that God had showed himself to where I allowed myself to pay attention.
So did you say that was the third time? Like you had, I just want to make sure I understand. So did you go to a shelter twice more before that?
No, I left, stayed with family for a little bit, left again, stayed with a close family friend of ours, stayed with another family member. So this was, at this point, I had already come and gone.
And you would like go because for the same reasons you finally left, but would come back because, like you were saying, you were more comfortable with what you knew, even though you knew it wasn't good. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the first, after 2 weeks, no contact, felt really good. I got the okay to go stay in the shelter. So I met my counselor at the office and then we drove to the shelter and I was terrified. Again, I still had the idea of shelter, metal beds, uniform, one after another. For some reason, it was just metal lockers at the foot of your bed.
Like a homeless shelter, what you would think of almost.
That's exactly what I envisioned. But we drove through this gate and I parked my car behind a big fence and I felt safe. I was hidden. I felt safe. And when we walked into the house, it was just a huge staircase. This is the biggest house I've ever been in. And it was just a huge staircase and it went up over and around like something you would see in Disney. But that was the second time where I trusted God that he would move me. And now this is the proof I moved you. I am proving to you that your faith is not misplaced. And
what was different about this third time than the first two times?
So it was, I didn't want my daughter. There was an incident where my abuser would break all of my daughter's stuff, anything that I worked for. I bought myself a laptop, brand new laptop with my tax return money. It was beautiful. Smashed right in front of me because I wasn't allowed to have anything and my daughter wasn't. And I didn't want her to live that way. And so that was, for me, at that point, I was like, you can do anything to me, but not my daughter is something completely different. So when I wanted her to have a different life is when it finally clicked.
So yeah, you were almost able to find strength through like the love that you had for your daughter.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, so one key thing that also brought me some empowerment the day that I left him is before I went to my parents' house, I was starving. I had to feed my daughter. I didn't know where to go have dinner at. I was just driving around and I was like, I don't have to argue with anybody about a decision I need to make. I don't have to justify myself to anybody at this point. And I didn't know what to do. And I just had to just stop and breathe. And I was able to sit there and try to figure out what we were going to have for dinner.
Wow.
And that was just the big part of when I had left that that empowerment I just don't know where it came from. So that's why it has to be attributed to God, because I didn't have it in me.
Yeah, that's so interesting because like I've taken classes at seminary about criminal justice stuff. And when people get out of jail and they come out, they don't know how to make decisions because they haven't been able to make any decisions for as long as they've been in. So it was almost like you were getting out of jail. I mean, you're having that same like, yeah, wow. And so like they have to be, I mean, I'm pretty sure they really have to relearn those skills. So that must have been a process for you.
Yeah, it definitely was. And we were in there for about 3 months. I learned a lot. My counselor, she saved my life. She saved my faith, my spirit. She saved my life. I still had like a mindset where I was like, okay, still learning so much, kind of just going through the program because I had to, and I had a direction at the end. I knew I was going to be living my life free of any violence or anything. So I was just going with the flow of the programs. But it wasn't until I started later on just trying to actually go to church. And that was about after I met somebody through a birthday party that our kids went to, and we just started talking, and it went from there, and that's how Misty and I met. Just right after I left my situation, I met her.
When was it that you met? And when was it that you started going to church? That's what I was going to ask you.
Through her. She's the one that started.
Was it at Messiah, or were you guys somewhere else? Yeah. So it was like more than a few years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. At least, I think it was like maybe 10 years ago.
Definitely before the ones were born.
Yeah.
Yeah, longer than 7 years. It wasn't always constant. It wasn't always every, and there were times that we would go to church and I'd say, I can't come back to this church. I can't. Or,
like what would make me feel that way? Like what? Remember?
Well, there were different things that that I feel are important to me as far as church goes. And one of the things that I feel like is that, you worship, but there's certain things that are said in the Bible, and people could argue them that it doesn't really make or break a church, but it's something that's kind of always been important to me personally, and that is the selling of goods during church. I can't get behind that. We're there for a reason. We're not there to be making a penny or a dollar. We're there to learn and to worship and to learn about God and to give him the glory. And I just little man-made things like that really kind of would bother me about certain congregations.
You just kind of like be able to discern something about that church that you didn't like. Yeah.
Right.
And then Samantha, what was it in you that made you want to start going to church? Do you remember? Like, what was it? What were you thinking? Or,
So, fast forward several years at this point, Misty, was in her abusive, she left her abuser.
Yeah.
And I had to go to Alabama because there was a possibility that I would have to testify.
I was in the middle of all the legal, the aftermath, the legal stuff of having to go through.
Yeah. So, we went down there, and then they found out that he had to be served papers. And Misty kept telling me the Bible verse about to be still, I'm God. I can't remember the exact Bible verse.
Be still and God. Yeah.
But that one was short enough I could remember. And I was like, so they said that if these papers can be delivered to him, it can show that he was properly served by midnight. And I was in Alabama, and I had to go all the way to DC. So,
By way of Charlotte, North Carolina?
Charlotte? Was it Charlotte or Atlanta? I think it was Charlotte.
Charlotte.
So, my layover, I had to fly from Birmingham to Charlotte. And when I got there, the flight, it was full. Like, I had the ticket and everything, but I guess there were no seats available. So I was so upset. I have my ticket and I was crying, and they shut the doors and everything. And I was like, there's nothing I can do about this. So you know what, God, I'm going to be still. I'm just going to sit right here and just be still. And if it is in your plan for this to happen, I'm going to trust you, but we'll see. I'm just going to, and I'm crying. I am just crying and just sitting there like that. And so doors are all shut. I'm prepared to just watch the plane go by. And then all of a sudden the doors just fly open. And this woman is running out with a ticket in her hand. And she slams it on the table. And she's saying something very briefly to the gentleman. And he looks at me, he points at me, and he's like, I got your seat. So I walk through that jam-packed plane, last seat. I'm wedged between this lady and this guy, and I'm sitting there crying my eyes out because that was the biggest pivotal point to me, where God says, you ask for me, you reach out to me, you need this, I'm going to be there for you. Yeah. And so it was from there that I started learning more, started talking to people, meeting some incredible people with some wonderful stories and some just testimony. And I was baptized. My daughter has been baptized. There's just a whole different just flow, because God has not only put his words out there, has shown, if you put yourself out there, I will put myself out there too. So I'm just continuing to put myself out there for God, knowing he will have my back.
Yeah. We were talking this morning. Oh yeah. In my Sunday school class, my Sunday morning group, I was trying to remember where it was. We were talking about like that story of Joseph, right? Sacrificing his son Isaac after he had waited for so long, and how that doesn't make sense. Like, why would God ask anybody to do that? But we're like, well, what can we glean from this story? What we can glean from this story is that, like, sometimes we really are pushed to the limit of what we're able to withstand. Right. But God shows us when we trust God, God is there for us. So that's like what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was just the big thing from before. My transformation had gone from, I had found comfort in fear, all the way to now I just have joy in God.
That's a huge transformation. I mean, that's like the opposite. Almost. Yeah, that's miraculous. Yeah.
And that's just my side. We still got Misty.
And you know what else? I just want to acknowledge that, like, Misty at this point is comfortable sharing her story, but this is like, you haven't shared your story that much, Samantha, right?
No, this is actually the first time I got to talk, even though it's not the full story. It's still some bits and pieces. And I wanted to make sure I told this part, the part where God had his hand in everything, because that's the most important. Yeah.
And I just feel honored that you are letting us hear it. So thank you. Because I think it's really hard, to share these types of stories. It's hard. It's never like super comfortable. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think that was one of the things that I learned through going through this is, and I think maybe that's why I have become comfortable in talking about it. I waited, like, my family didn't know I was going through anything until I was just about ready to actually walk out the door. And they suspected, but they didn't know because they weren't around, they didn't see, but they picked up on stuff. But I think that it was 2 years after I had left that I was standing watching a news story about a homeless man in DC that used the inside part of a mattress to paint with, and he was creating these beautiful pieces of art. And I was watching the story, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation came up, but the stranger said something to me, and I just turned around and was like, well, my answer was, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And it was the first time I had used the word survivor and not victim. I'm not a victim of domestic violence. 2 years later, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And for me, that was an empowering moment, just to be able to call myself a survivor versus a victim. And I think that going through things like this, that time to grow in yourself and to grow in God, is just, I tell my kid all the time to trust the process. Sometimes we have to just trust the process that God is putting us through, and his hand is in it, no matter. I think it was this morning, the lemonade. God's favorite drink is lemonade. You take lemons and turn it into lemonade.
Church sermon.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. That is trusting the process of, if you're believing that God is in the middle of it and that God is guiding you. And for me, it was, I'm very hard-headed, and God had to put it in my face for me to say, okay, I hear you now. And it was when people were coming to me and they would say, so are you a Christian? Are you a mom? We have a book for you. And it was to the point where I was telling Sammy, these people are just coming up to me and talking to me about God. And, no one's ever really done that before. And Sammy, we had just had the conversation. We went into a store, we came out, and a lady pulled up next to us in a Bronco and asked for a restaurant. And I had to apologize. We didn't know the area of DC. And she went on to tell us her testimony in about a minute and a half, how she used to be, this and that, and that, God changed her. And she handed me a business card with her name, her number, and a Bible verse on it. And the whole time Sammy is punching me in the arm, like, is this what you're talking about? This lady's talking to you about God. What are you going to do? And I was like, I know, this is what I'm talking about. Like, people are just coming out of the woodworks to just like flood me with this. And all of that became, when God became more than just a word, he became a being. I mean,
an active participant in your life, sort of.
Very active, to the point where I didn't have a choice but to listen, and when it came time for me to actually leave my abusive situation, I thought that I had been making a plan for 8 months, building, figuring it out. I had, a baby that had medical needs. I had a younger child that, I needed to make sure I had everything for him. And when it came time, it wasn't anything like I thought I had planned. God put everything in my path, all about 6 to 8 weeks, preparing me for a journey that I didn't know I was taking. And one day I gave Sammy my apartment key and I said, I need for you to go and I need for you to get these things and just keep them at your house. And she said, well, should I put them in the attic? And I said, no, I'm going to need them quite soon. It's not going to take long. She said, okay, I'll leave it by the front door. And that was a Saturday. And by I think Monday. I told her that I would be picking them up on Thursday. And I made a plan. My plan went from thinking that I had it all worked out to sneaking formula and my clothes out in a box of donations, and having Sammy take some things out of my apartment when nobody was watching. And on Thursday, July 2nd, I went to Sammy's house in the morning. I was supposed to be on my way to work. I went back. I left the house and waited. Once he had left the house to leave for work, I actually went back, picked my baby up out of the nurse's arms, and walked out with my child, and left. And within about 10 minutes, he knew I'd left the house. So
the nurse had told him, or
the nurse ended up waking up his brother, who was asleep in the home, and they called him. They called the police. There was an Amber Alert. I've heard that was put out. It was false. There was no reason for an Amber Alert to be put out, but they were doing everything they could to stop me from leaving. I got about 10 minutes down the road and realized I had to throw my cell phone out because there was a location tracker on it. I was on his plan. So I deleted everything and dropped my new phone out the window and ran over it with my car tire. But I could do that because months earlier, I had applied for a track phone through Fairfax County assistance with food services through the school system. And I happened to get it in my mailbox one day. And so I just tucked it away and made one call a month for like 4 months, just to keep it active. And every month they gave me 300 minutes and I would use it to call just to make sure that it stayed on. And so the day that I left and I ran over my phone, I actually could still communicate with my domestic violence counselor from Alexandria. I could call my brother and my mom to let them know I was out safely. And I could let Sammy know that I was on my way to her house to pick up my stuff and that I would be there in about 10 minutes. So I used it for necessities just to make the leaving process, had to work. I had to let people know that I was out. So I was able to use that phone and continue to use it for about 2 months, even after I left.
So how did you connect with that domestic violence counselor? Like both of you, because Samantha, you had one too, right? Did you have one before you left? I can't remember.
No. So before I had left, I tried different avenues, like through the county, and the domestic violence hotline was something that kept me going. Sometimes definitely utilize the domestic violence hotline. And that was all I had. But the counseling I received once I was in the shelter through their program.
Got it. Okay.
For mine, I actually I forget who referred me, but the city of Alexandria has domestic violence counseling and women's group down there to help in the city of Alexandria, because I actually lived in the city of Alexandria during that time. Wonderful organization. Definitely helped me, even though I did not meet with my counselor because it was dangerous for me to meet with them. I could call at any time and talk to her and give her notes. And it was wonderful because she kept me empowered by telling me things that I needed to do for my situation, and how it would have to orchestrate. If I was going to leave, I needed to make it a clean break. I needed to make sure that I wasn't going back, because I truly feared my life. I felt that if I did go back, he would kill me. He had told me several times that he would kill me. Sometimes he told me how he would kill me. So when those things happened and I felt like it was at my lowest point, verbally, emotionally, mentally, Even physically, I would call her, we would talk, and I had no idea that she kept notes on everything. I mean, it makes sense, but I wasn't thinking about her keeping notes. And, you know, she definitely had a hand in saving my life. She would call and check on me when she felt it was safe, or I would tell her when I would be able to talk. She would encourage me to file police reports. So the day that I left, I actually called her as I was on my way to Sammy's house to pick my things up. And she asked me very briefly, are you safe? Are the children safe? Do you have everything that you need to, take care of the baby? And once I told her that, she said, okay, let them know that everything's okay. And so she became a voice for me by letting them know that, there was no need for the Amber Alert. The baby was safe. The baby had what he needed, and there was other things that she did along the way. She made sure that I had support when I even went to the courtroom, going through the legal stuff. She sat in, in the courtroom with me. And anything that I would have needed or had questions about, she definitely pointed me in the right direction.
That's something people should know about, I guess,
Definitely. It's my understanding that at least around here, I would dare say that most places would have an organization that is, comparable to what the city of Alexandria has. I'm pretty sure that the county of Fairfax has one as well. Some are private organizations, some are public organizations.
Cool.
Definitely.
Awesome. So where do you think that, so I've heard your story, Misty, and you shared it at church once. Like where was God the most in that process? Are you able to say that, or?
So I think that it started when Arian was about 6 months old and his lungs seized up and he had to go back on a ventilator. And I sit outside in the hospital hall and was just like, all right, God, this is all in your hands. There is nothing I can do about it. He started working then, little things. Someone would come in. I was waiting tables at the time. So somebody would come in and say, oh, you should pray with us before we eat our meal. And that had not happened for the few months that I had been there before. I met a wonderful minister who came in. She and I are still great friends. And she actually baptized the boys and christened them before Arian came home from the hospital. And it was just these little things that people put in my way. Arian started to come home from the hospital and I said, we need 2 oxygen concentrators because Dad and I don't share a common house. And the lady said, I've done this for 30 something years. I've never known anybody to get 2 oxygen concentrators. Those are like $3,000-$4,000 machines. I said, well, could you just try? I mean, what would it hurt? So, I had been given a book by a customer who asked me, are you a parent and are you a Christian? And one of the opening chapters said, God knows what your problems are. And he just needs you to ask to illuminate the answer, illuminate the answer, not repeat the problem. God knows what that is. So I said, okay, I was kind of like Sammy on the Be Still. I said, all right, let's just see. All right, God. And every morning I got up and every morning I said, God, I need that concentrator. Could you just illuminate the answer? I just need to, what do I do here? I can't afford to buy a $3,000-$4,000 machine. And I think it was probably 4 or 5 days later, this lady called me and she said, Miss Turner, I forget her name. She was like, I am will tell you that I have never had this happen, but I found a company that's going to give 2 oxygen concentrators, one for Dad's house and one for your house. I would have never thought this would happen. And I thought, okay. So that happened. And then I needed the phone. The phone happened a few months later, and I just tucked it away. At the time, I didn't even have a car. So I thought, well, if I'm going to leave, how am I going to leave? I don't even have a car. I mean, well, God gave me a job that provided enough income for me to be able to go and buy a car that was big enough to put my children in, and an oxygen concentrator and toys and anything that we needed immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And other than the oxygen concentrator, everything else seemed to just kind of fall like within probably about 10 weeks or so. And then, it was sometimes it's the smallest thing that makes people leave. It's not the biggest blowout fight, that makes people leave. It can be the smallest thing that just is the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm-hmm.
And mine was, I had realized that he was trying to separate me from having a relationship with not just our child that we had together, but my other 2 children. And when I realized that, I thought, I think I've had enough. And Cameron was preparing to go to camp, and I started packing his stuff. And that was the day that I realized I'm going to pack as much as I can in there, whether it's needed for camp or not. He's leaving the house. Let's just get everything out at once. And, again, God put this in my path so that I could get Cameron out of the house. I got him out safely. He was out for days. He was having a great time. I could check that off my list.
And Cameron's like, wow, Mom, you really packed my stuff for me,
Right. Wow, I'm going to need all these toys. Great.
I want to rewind. I remember earlier in the conversation, you had mentioned that God brought, kind of, I can't remember your words, but God sort of put you through this to grow you and everything. I would say, and this might just be a matter of wording, but I don't believe God does put us through this kind of abuse and, cruelty and misery on purpose, suffering. It goes to that big question. Why does God allow suffering or whatever? But we know that we do go through it, And so then I guess the question is, how is God going to guide us to the other side? And I think that both of you are really able to really, communicate that and see it, and even when both of you are talking about, and then I saw God do this and that, I'd also think, I bet you God, this entire time, your entire lives has been doing things like this, but it's only when suddenly we start to look around, the whole illumine this for me. Suddenly we're enlightened, and it's like, oh, it's almost like a gift.
Yes.
Of God that we're now able to be aware of the way that God is working in our life,
Oh, yeah.
I think now I'm not talking about you two, I'm talking about people in general. We're so busy. We're so distracted. We have so much on our minds. This is a really hard world to live in, that we can just miss it. I'm like, I want to see it. I want to see it, because even in the midst of our suffering, if I see it, I'm like, thank you. It helps us. It strengthens us. So, all right.
Yeah. It's, there were times that, it was, someone once described it, and I have to agree with it. When you're in that situation, you think, we've been sitting here building this life. How could this person treat me this way? I don't want to live this way. I don't want my children to live this way. So it's like it's like a power struggle, like with yourself. It's like hoping for the best and preparing for the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really difficult way to live. But when you get to the other side, you think, I had to do that to balance things out, even along the way, and you really want someone to be better, to be a better person. That was who you thought you met, But
That's
you can't, you know, we were actually having a conversation about this other day about, do you pray for your abuser? You know, do you pray for them? And, you know, we did a little soul searching the other day about that, because we had to prepare and keep our babies safe and get ourselves out safely, you know. But how do you go forward with this person that's done this to you, or that, you know, turned your life upside down? You know,
that's actually interesting. So what I think you're saying is like, you know, maybe we all assume that you're being abused. Like, you hate this guy. You want to run away. But really, you've created this life together. You've had children together. There's probably parts of this person you might actually still love. And so it's not this easy, non-complicated solution.
right. I think a lot of people go through that. And sometimes it, you know, I have not had any contact since the morning I left. There was no communication between us, even at court. It's and I'm okay with that. I think I could handle it now if it crossed my path to have the conversation. But I think that for anybody that's in that situation, you do have that struggle with those feelings that you once had, this person that, you know, at one time they did something to attract, you know, you to wanting to spend time with them, to be around them, you know, and now,
you want it to work. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes it's the loss of the relationship. I think more than the person themselves, for some people.
Yeah, maybe like the loss of a dream or what you hoped you had. So would you say that when you're dealing with fear and just a lot of fear, but also probably a lot of grief then too, you know, just a lot of different things.
I think that just like losing someone who's passed away that you're close to, I think that there's a process to go through that. I think sometimes you'll get angry, you know, at the loss of someone, and then you get sad. And then you feel sorry for them, you know, in our situation, you know, how could someone do this? So you have remorse for that person in some sense.
You have compassion for them. Yeah, you know what? I took this healing prayer class a few years ago, and I actually thought you guys would like it. It's free. It's at the Falls Church Anglican. They do it every year. After I talked to you a few weeks ago, I was like, y'all would really like this. But anyway, they talked about how sometimes, and I don't know what I believe about this, but you know, what blocks us from God sometimes is unforgiveness. This is a really big deal for them. And so they have this whole process for forgiveness. And they're like, don't ask God to help you. Like, that's not what we're doing. You're just doing it. Just because you don't feel like you've forgiven somebody doesn't mean you haven't forgiven them. You're like, yes, I forgive this person. And you can still feel angry and all these things. And then over time, you're going to have to forgive them again and again and again and again and again. It's going to keep coming up. And you're just going to notice it's getting maybe easier or different. But then part of their process is to actually pray blessings over that person. And I remember I took this class with somebody who had gone through a divorce, and she was like, I cannot do that. I cannot do that. Okay, like, very long bridge to cross. But I think when we think of God blessing people, we think, oh, God's going to give them $1 million. I don't want that person to have $1 million. That's not fair. But I think we have to expand the way we think of God's blessings. It could be God reveals God's self to that person. You know, that would be a blessing. Like, just something to think about. It's kind of interesting when it comes to forgiveness and that conversation that you said.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to talk about more of that.
Yeah. Anyway, so before I start kind of saying some other things, did you all have anything else you felt was important to share?
So I think about, well, in 2016, I came back to Virginia, and it was still very hard. It wasn't like, I left and then everything was just beautiful garden and peachy king. It's definitely been an uphill battle with getting reacclimated and settled and finding the strength to actually live on your own again, doors locked. But even though that's been my personal battle in the past few years, Sammy and I have had the opportunity to, and we've come across some very resilient women that we've helped in different regards. Not always the same way. Not everybody needs the same help at the same time. But we've definitely been able to use what we've been through to help several women to get out of their situation. I say women, I should say victims, because there was one gentleman that we've helped. And so about a year ago, well, we've always had, just like you do your best friend, you sit down and you talk about everything. Whenever it comes to mind, you just throw it out there. And so we've done that over the last few years about helping people and how we could help them and what was on our heart. And last year, we were faced with the possibility of needing to help someone furnish an apartment for her and her children. And what we realized was that as much as we want to help somebody, neither one of us have the space or the means to actually organize and do it the way traditionally it's been done, by housing clothes, certain size, boy, girl, men, women, household items, and so forth. But we still have felt like we needed to give back, and we wanted to help people. It's always been on our heart to do that. And so about a year ago, we started figuring out how we could do this with the limited space that we have. And so over the last year, we've developed the idea of tangible resources in a backpack. We now have a website. It's called packedproject.org. It's spelled PAKDPROJECT.org. This is kind of our prototype backpack. In here are the resources to help someone with their like a hospitality bag, toiletry bag with things in it. We also are going to equip it with a non-contract phone and resources for food and shelter stay, not a shelter or a permanent placement situation. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to bridge that gap that Sammy and I both have been through when you're leaving an abusive situation to where you're actually working with an organization that can give you that permanent placement. There's that unknown, that comfort and fear turned into fear. Yeah. Sammy had 2 weeks to figure it out, whether she was going to stay with an abuser or whether she, was going to try to find family and friends to stay with. And so what we want to do is we want to, with the nonprofit that we are in the middle of creating, we want to create these backpacks that have these resources in there that will put a roof over someone's head in a hotel for a minimum stay of 1 to 3 nights. If they're working with an organization for permanent placement, we can make arrangement for a longer stay until they can get into that permanent placement situation. It's going to be able to sustain them with the resources that they need to stay away from the abuser so that they can work with a organization to make that permanent change in their life.
So cool. So where are you at in that process? Like, where are you at with the establishing it and getting it ready?
So we have filed our 501c3.
Oh, cool.
We have filed all the state and tax papers to make it legitimate. We have we've opened up a bank account. We're so excited about our bank account so that we are able to start. We're writing grants right now. If anybody knows any grant writers out there that would love to assist us, because we're learning about grants and how to write them. So we're currently, this last week, we've been writing content for the grants and started applying for some of the grants.
That is really exciting. I'm thinking about this biography I read, George Mueller. I'll try to find my book. You can read it. But he opened up all these orphanages. I can't remember where now, maybe Germany or something. But he never wanted to ask for anything, but he would ask God, and it always happened. So I know you all are already doing that. And we'll see if God answers that prayer for you.
So we put, Misty and I have a rule that God is at the forefront of this. When we have our meetings, we pray. When we conclude our meetings, we pray. Whenever we complete something, we did our 501c3, we pray. We meet somebody, anything that we do that just moves us, and we call it the tingles. We'll get the tingles. Like we pray about it because it really is God driven, and it needs the glory is to Him, and we have the goal. I just feel like He's going to be moving us in the way. So that's, yeah.
We started all of this on March 3rd. The birthday of Pact Project's actually March 12th. So a little bit over a month. And every time, we're like, okay, so what do we need to do next? Somebody texts us, somebody emails us, and when we meet somebody, and it's kind of taken, we're just kind of following along, I feel like at times, to where it's kind of taken its own growth in life, and we're just kind of there to push a little bit.
Yeah. So I put the website in the comments. If people wanted to offer support in any way, whether it's like expertise or something else, is there a way that they can reach you through that website?
I'll let you tell them.
So we do have a telephone number that we're using for our company number. The goal one day is to have it so that if somebody needs to contact us immediately, they could reach us through that as well. There is, right now we're set up through PayPal directly, where you can hit the Learn More button and it'll send you directly there. But the goal is,
and they can contact us through there. Can they leave messages?
Yeah, they can do messages on there. The goal is to be able to do a chat. Our main website is still under construction, so once we merge, we will have a chat button, and once we get that feature up and running, I feel like we would be able to really expedite that in real time. Right. And that's important.
We have to wait to May 14th to use our real website. So we're just not old enough yet. We had to be 60 years old, and we're just not there yet. But May 14th, that new website should be up with more links and the chat feature.
Well, that's so amazing. Like, I'm very proud of the way that you transform your suffering into this, like, just amazing purpose. And even if you didn't use it in this way, just your energy and the way that you share your stories, and that right there is just a huge gift to anybody around you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I know Samantha, I'm very excited to hear this. She wrote like a prayer that would kind of capture our conversation and close us out. So
yes, it's not very long. So I want to say, Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this opportunity to explain how you have moved our lives for you. Throughout periods of pain and quiet reflection, you've been there. During a time where stumbling through the wilderness became so normal, logic and personality faded. You shone your light and sought us out. Lord, I'm grateful for your light that fills us, and I pray that light continues to burn and touch even the darkest parts of humanity. God, I pray that your blessings continue to bend us to your will and push us towards those in need of you. God, the journey and wilderness struggles have a purpose, and you see our truest version of ourselves. Lord, I pray that version you see is visible to others, and that you remove the fear that may immobilize someone and replace it with faith and clarity. Protect us, Lord, and take over to allow us to reveal your vision. We never know the purpose as to why we go through these difficult life-altering decisions, but we can try to trust the process. Thank you for that trust in return and for the reminders that you fight for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you, Samantha. Oh my gosh, I loved that. So, what would you say, like, because you said this a little bit in your prayer, but if somebody was, listening to this and kind of going through something similar, what would be like one or two sentences or whatever you would just think, this is what I want to share with them?
I would just say there's always information. Some people don't realize how much information is out there to help you. I feel like domestic violence is just swept under the rug, and there's so many resources, but they're not highlighted. People don't advertise it. People don't hey, this is known. So there are resources out there for you to have what you need, and just really look for those resources, because that fear of thinking you have to do this alone, you do not. There in any way. You have support. Just reach out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just knowing that they're not alone is huge.
Exactly. And reaching out in itself is probably one of the biggest steps, because I remember calling the domestic violence hotline and hanging up, or just like crazy stalker breathing, maybe a little bit. I don't know. Just I was terrified, but once you get through it and you're like, okay, there's something to be said in that. So thank you.
What about you, Misty?
I didn't grow up knowing, like, I'm sure people went through abusive situations. I just was oblivious to it, did not know about it. People didn't talk about it. I think that's one of the reasons why I am passionate and I don't mind talking about it, because it's something that you go through, and at the time you feel like you are the only one who's ever gone through it. You see people, you could I remember having a bruise and thinking, wow, no one else is walking around with bruises on their face, but I have one on mine. What did I do? And then you question yourself, and it's this whole self deterioration that you're going through. And I feel like if we talk about it, if we put it out there, people aren't as ashamed that they're in the situation, because there's really nothing for them to be ashamed about. They're not the ones doing it. They're the ones it's being done to. And so I think that if I was to tell anyone anything, I can't make anyone leave. I can't, say this is the best thing for your situation. Every situation's different. But what I would tell them is that you're definitely not alone. And there's a million people out there that would, be in their corner to fight with them, whether they knew them or not. But that abuse is not a solo thing that's done to just them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is, you said something about like, I don't remember what the words were exactly, but yeah, when we don't talk about it, there's such an opportunity for shame to just grow and grow and grow, and silence us. And so with any of these stories, just bringing them to light right there, that just kind of shines some light in the darkness so that you can see a little clearer.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to end this for everybody else, but you all can stay on. So don't get off.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody, for watching. Bye.